What was the furthest you've gone, just to prove your point? Years ago I told my wife I wanted to create a home media room in the basement with a really big TV and premium sound system, etc. The whole works. Problem was the basement was undeveloped. She said sure, you can have that, but you have to develop the basement yourself. She knew full well I had exactly zero knowledge of anything to do with that, and was therefore smugly assuming I would give up on the idea. I did not. Instead, I spent the next 18 months of my life down in that basement every day after work and all weekend long. Framed it, wired it, ran the plumbing, hung the drywall. Okay, I did hire out the mudding and taping, put down the lino and the carpet, installed the cabinets, all the plumbing, all the painting, you name it. And I took my time and did it right, so that when it was done it was close to the same quality as if I had had it professionally developed. The home theater which I bought and had set up by a high-end retailer was awesome. Naturally, we moved a year later. This is a story of one of my friends, not mine. It had been a good 5 years since everyone started having smartphones instead of the old ones with the buttons. Two friends of mine were having a heated conversation. One of them owned a smartphone and the other one insisted on keeping his old, traditional cell phone. The smartphone guy was listing all those things that smartphones provided and we now take for granted, while the other guy pretty much repeated I only need it for phone calls and texts and it's much more durable. This went on for a good couple of hours, and when the second guy mentioned durability for the millionth time, the smartphone guy, red-faced, grabbed his Sony Xperia Play, the PlayStation phone, and threw it out of the open window yelling, "I'm tired of your bullshit, I bet it won't have a scratch." We all stood in silence for a full minute and then we finally decided to go out and see what was left of the smartphone. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. Miraculously, the smartphone wasn't even scratched, indeed, but as you can probably guess, when he pressed the power button, it just never booted. Got married, had kids. I'm not gay, Dad. I don't understand, I only prove my point in my head years after the actual argument, mostly when I'm taking a shower. Had a couple issues with my Xbox. I forget what the second one was, but it had something to do with something that was dependent on connecting to Xbox Live. The first was, I could not connect to Xbox Live in the first place. So I called customer support. When I explained what was going on, the dude I was talking to immediately starts trying to solve the second problem. So I jumped in and said, "Hey, sorry to interrupt, but don't you think we should be trying to figure out why I can't connect to Xbox Live first?" He completely dismissed me and let me know he knew what he was doing. I knew it would have been much quicker if I corrected him, but I decided it would be fun to see how far this would go. So after 20 minutes of troubleshooting and not solving anything, he asked some question about what I was seeing on my screen. And I said my screen doesn't show those options. And he said that's not right, when you're connected to the internet, you should see those options. And I replied, I'm still not connected to the internet. There was a pause. You could hear it dawning on him as he asked, "You're not connected to the internet?" And I said, "No. I told you that when we first started talking." I thought this was a weird way to problem solve, but I figured since you're the professional, you'd know better what to do than me. He let out a long exhale. and you could just feel over the line him releasing frustration and anger. To his credit, he remained polite and professional the rest of the phone call, and when the call ended, my issues were fixed. My ex was making popcorn and went to push the popcorn button on the microwave. I told him that the button is bullshit and will burn the popcorn. He didn't believe me, so we argued, and finally I said just push the button and we'll see. So we wait and I can smell the popcorn burning, but I don't stop the microwave because I'm so mad. It eventually stopped and he takes the bag out. There was a hole burnt into the bottom of the bag and the popcorn was very burnt. Then he got mad at me for not stopping the microwave. It took me forever to clean the microwave, but it was worth it. We broke up soon after. Well, I tried to tell my neighbor that there is too much dog shit on my front yard. He didn't believe me until that dog shit ended up on his front yard in the middle of the night. Now he sees my point. The back of the Final Fantasy VII manual dared me to beat the game without a memory card. So I did. I kayaked a mile across open water to an island in the Great Lakes to get one rock. And now I can say I was an illegal immigrant to Canada for like 30 minutes. Not me, but my mother-in-law. Her husband passed away long before I was part of the family, and I would have loved to hear his side of the story, but anyways. He really didn't like eating healthy. I've been told the closest he got to eating fruit was gummy fruit snacks, and vegetables. Forget about it. Well, anyways, they adopted my husband and my brother-in-law, and Mill really started pushing him to eat greens and veggies. If you don't eat them, neither will the kids. You need to model healthy eating habits. He refused. This went on for months and months. They got into a big fight about it and he said, I'd sooner eat moldy green roadkill than spinach and broccoli. So the next night at dinner time, Mill went out into their driveway, where she had run over and killed a frog the previous day. She puts this squished, dead frog on his plate, then serves it to him at dinner time. Okay. I see your point. I'll eat the salad. Right after college I was sharing a house with 5 close friends. There were 4 bathrooms and I was sharing one with my boy Don. We agreed to always use our own stuff to keep things simple. He usually got up earlier than me and it seemed every time I got to the shower my bar of soap was wet. I asked him if he was using my soap and he denied. We had a few friendly arguments about it. Where the soap was placed it wouldn't ever get under the stream of water and he would need to be standing at weird angles for any deflection or just doing it on purpose. This goes on for weeks and he starts getting offended and the discussion about it are no longer funny. I didn't care that much but it was really messing with my head. Driving home from work one day I get the idea to just run the shower for a few minutes with no one in it to see. For some reason this made Don furious, not like we were going to fight or anything, and I took that as I was finally going to prove him guilty. Anyways, ran the shower for 5 minutes while prepping dinner, come back and check and the soap is in fact wet. Sorry Don. You're not getting this bottle of milk until you stop screaming. 74 minutes. Never, ever, underestimate the appetite for conflict of a 2-year-old. I was told my chili had too much onion. So I ate an onion like an apple to demonstrate that there is no such thing as too much onion. I struggled to get something I needed from another co-worker, CAD design drawings, and it was taking months. I told him that I could go to night school and learn AutoCAD and do it myself in the time it would take him to get the drawings back to me. He said whatever. So I went to night class, learned AutoCAD, produced my own drawings, and cut him out of the equation. A few months later he was fired. I guess other employees were having the same difficulty. Thanks to the internet and smartphones, most of the absolute ridiculous arguments I used to have are settled calmly and quickly. Had a buddy tell me he didn't have the time or resources to strength train and build muscle. So, I decided to see if I could build muscle doing fairly minimal effort over time. I built a pull-up bar for $10 and bought a couple of 10lb free weights. After 6 months of doing pull-ups, 10 to 16, per day and 50 curls every day, I built a good amount of upper body muscle on a budget, and it only takes me about 5 minutes a day to do it. Didn't need a gym membership or GNC type garbage either. I also lost about 5% of my body fat because more muscle means a higher basal metabolic rate. The guy and I don't speak anymore, so I got fit to prove a point that I'll never get to prove. Quit my job after 11 years to prove I did the work of 4 or 5 people and that I deserved more money. Also, in my last 2 weeks only did what was my job. Once while traveling to uni on a very crowded public bus with 2 of my friends, we were all studying the same degree, we got into an argument about something. The bus was a packed peak hour city express, so no one was talking and almost everyone around us could hear the disagreement. I knew I was wrong about 30 seconds after starting, but stuck to my point until we got off 10 minutes later because I didn't want to look like a complete idiot to strangers on a bus. The topic was niche enough I was fairly confident no one other than my friends would realize I was actually an idiot. Technically, 14 miles. Wife didn't believe me that in the UK the national speed limit is variable depending on the type of road it applies to, essentially single carriageway, 60 miles per hour, dual carriageway, 70 miles per hour. She argued that the authorities wouldn't be so unspecific about it. Ended up going on a 14-mile trip to a dual carriageway that had a 60 miles per hour sign to stop drivers going to 70 miles per hour. I often bring it up in other arguments because it's one of the few times my wife has admitted she was wrong. Pretended I didn't know what a potato was until my girlfriend's dad kicked me out of their house. My brother didn't believe my front door was bulletproof. I think you can guess the rest of the story. My stepmom is an anti-vax and essential oil enthusiast. She constantly complains about us spending too much money, particularly me with video games and my sister who gets her nails done frequently. In the living room, there's a shelf in the back with dozens upon dozens of bottles of doTERRA essential oils. When home alone, I wrote down the name of each and every single oil she owned and the size. I then went on their website and calculated how much she has spent on oils. Most were $50-$70 CAD each and some were up to $300 a vial. I ended up calculating $5,500 spent on oils. I also pulled up an article talking about how none of these oils are FDA approved and none of them have any evidence of being medicinal. I also found a lawsuit launched on an e-oil company for falsely advertising the oils as medical and cancer curing. So what was that about my spending habits, bitch? I was 21 and at a club and told my friend I could dance better than the go-go dancers. Got a phone number to call from a bouncer and told someone named Barbie I wanted to audition. 8 months later, I was about to graduate for college, and I got an email saying they were holding auditions. Fuck it, I've committed to the bit this far, so I go to the auditions and completely bomb it. I'm only good at dancing to songs I actually like, and the boots they dance in are heavy AF. I have a lot of respect for professional dancers. Drove way out to the Hamptons to prove to my fiancé's parents that I had a place there. I didn't, and the pieces of shit called my bluff. I bet my wife half my stuff that I will love her forever. Not me, but my dad. My grandmother, his mother, was a pretty avid smoker and smoked whenever, even during dinner. Eventually he asked, "How come you can't stop smoking?" and her response was something along the lines of, "You can't quit something you've grown up with." And so my dad was it then and went vegan for about a month. I ate one Lay's potato chip and then didn't eat another for 20 years. I drank 2 shot glasses full of isopropyl alcohol just to prove I can't die from it. Had an absentee boss who would show up to cuss people out and pipe in on email chains to throw his direct reports under the bus. Finally had enough and quit near the finish line of the company's largest ever project. I gave him a public dressing down while I did it, and I knew he was too incompetent and out of the loop to handle the remaining work on his own. I got a call the next day from his boss begging me to come back. I told her everything he was putting his team through. She offered me a raise to finish the project. I accepted on the condition that my boss be sidelined. An HR investigation began, and I finished the project and immediately left to work for a better company. I used my university's online library to find academic articles from peer-reviewed journals to prove that cow's milk is not full of pus and that cows are not constantly suffering from cracked and bleeding teats. Listen, if you want to be a vegan, fine. More power to you. But don't spread around misinformation without actually checking that it comes from a credible source. We get enough of that from the anti-vaxxers. My dad wouldn't let me play paintball when I was a kid. He said he didn't like making people targets. So naturally, I joined the Marine Corps Infantry. I don't think I had a real point, it was more driven by spite. I made it on the news so I could say, "Remember the time you were so wrong, it made the news." I still say it. I joined the Marines and went to Iraq twice to avoid serving a Mormon mission. My dad went on a rant about how I'm his daughter and will act as such and dress as such, blah blah whatever. Pissed me off, so I went to the hairdresser the next day and shaved my head. TBH, I didn't really want a buzz cut, but the look on my dad's face made my entire month. Moved into my dad's to prove how crazy my mom was making me. Best decision of my childhood. Someone didn't believe me when I quoted Jack Sparrow seriously and said improbable, not impossible, over winning a 1v6 in paintball. So I did. I edited a Wikipedia page so I could win an argument. Joined the army, proved the point, but it was pretty much a cell phone towards the end. Froze time and moved a fully grown man down a step, then go back up the steps before unfreezing time to make it seem like he was too scared to take a step towards me, and I'd repeat the process until he left on his own, all to flex on him. I used to have a roommate who would make fun of me whenever we went out drinking, because I was usually the first one to go to the bathroom and release my beer. He'd make comments like, "You can't hold your beer," and so on. This had never been an issue before, and before him I had never met anyone who felt a need to associate bladder continence with masculinity. He was a football player in college, which might have had something to do with it. After putting up with this for several months, finally one night I decided I'd had enough. A bunch of us went out for beers, and I decided that tonight I simply was not going to urinate. Period. As the evening wore on, he started looking more and more uncomfortable. All night long I had my kegels and my butthole clenched so tight I could have cracked walnuts in my taint, but I wasn't going to let on to him. He asked me a couple of times, "Don't you have to go to the bathroom?" But I just smiled and said, "No, I'm fine." Finally, we all finished up and headed home. The apartment he and I shared had 2 bathrooms. You know that urge to go you get when you open the front door when you get home. He turned the key, burst through the door and literally sprinted for one of the bathrooms. I couldn't help but laugh. I casually strolled to the other bathroom, unzipped, and had the longest release of my life. I felt like a balloon deflating. I'm still conflicted about the incident. But he never razzed me about my bladder ever again. When I was a kid I ate chicken tenders at every restaurant I ever went to. They were cheap and consistent and I liked them. But when I started to hit my teenage years, adults started to make fun of me for it. They were always so snarky about it, as if eating a cheeseburger made them better than me somehow. I hated it, the people always telling me I would grow out of it. "Oh, you'll change your mind when you're older." "Oh, well, I am our fortune teller?" Because I'm 24 now and my streak is unbroken. I do it mostly out of spite at this point. Well, that and I still genuinely love chicken tenders. My roommate wouldn't stop buying the cheapest single-ply toilet paper, so I lit a roll of it on fire to express my displeasure. I walked 500 miles, then I walked 500 more, just to be the man that walked 1,000 miles and aggressively masturbate at their door. Still living a child-free, single, minimalist life. No, I never did grow out of these ideas of too many people, too much garbage, too much pandering to others, and too much worrying about non-essential objects. I'm 40. The hell I see my peers living in has only reinforced my points. Gave myself a third-degree burn to prove to this dude that chicks aren't pussies like he was claiming, and then called him a pussy for not burning me himself like he was talking shit about. Joined the Navy because a friend said I'd never make it through boot camp. Did my original 4 years and extended my enlistment for another year. Mom didn't believe I was lactose intolerant. Explained to her I felt sick every time I drank milk, ate cheese, etc. Finally grabbed an almost full gallon from the fridge and started chugging it. Tried to keep going but ended up throwing up. Mom furious I wasted all that milk and said still refused to believe I'm lactose. Later I unleashed my unholy dairy butthole kraken and didn't flush until she got home and saw it. Still doesn't believe me to this day. I am in sales. The first one in on Saturdays gets all the leads from the night before, the first lead of the day, and the first walk-in. The office opens at 8:30, so I would get there at 7:30. Then someone started getting there at 7:25. So I would get there at 7:15. Then they came in at 7. There was a discrepancy in who got a lead one day and my coworker and manager said I was unambiguous and lacked a competitive spirit. So I bought some camping gear and got to the office at 1 a.m. and sent everyone a selfie. Yeah, no, just chillin' being unambitious.